Hey guys, it's Bina, and today I want to bring you my guide for the Tornado Werewolf to clear Nightmare Dungeons 100. So my version is based off of being as tanky as possible, since we already get so much damage just from rampaging Werebees, which gives us 990% critical strike damage. So damage is really not a problem in this build. It's just about getting as tanky as possible, and we'll go over the overview of the build right now. So first of all, what skills are we using? We're using Tornado for our main damage. We're using Storm Strike as our generator. We have Grizzly Rage as our ultimate skill, Cyclone Armor for support, Blood Howl for support, and Hurricane for support as well. Okay, let me just reload this one here. Okay, so that is what we use for skills. For our boons, we get 10% damage reduction from elites, 10% maximum life. We get extended duration of ultimate skills by 25%. Calm Before the Storm, so nature magic skills have a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your Grizzly Rage, so that's very important. And Masochistic for our healing. In our Paragon board, we are using Territorial, we're using Earth and Sky, we're using Werewolf, Fang and Claw, and then we're also using Undaunted. All right, so that is the overview of the build. As we can see, we are socketing rubies in our gear, and I will explain right now why we're using rubies and not sapphires. As I see many guides using sapphires, and I believe it's just kind of like the wrong thing to do. But maybe I am wrong, but I believe I am absolutely right on this one. So I open up here my EHP calculator from last epoch, tonklab.com. So I kind of use it just for a general EHP calculator for any game I can play. You just enter your values, and it's very easy to put extra custom damage reduction stats in here. So as you can see, this is the values that I have. So when using the max roll planner stats here, the only thing this total life doesn't take into account is the percentage maximum life from our boon, but that won't really matter too much. So because we're getting so much percentage life on our Paragon board, rubies are actually very much worth it. You can see here 23,912, that's with using rubies, and then 23,429, that's when using 5 sapphires. Because all damage reductions are multiplicative, we put the 5 separate damage reduction stats here, and we are about 2% tankier when we are using rubies instead of sapphires. You can do the math for yourself, but if you are using a lot of percentage life in your Paragon board, you absolutely want to put rubies here, because not only do you always get that value, because life is always there, but and fortification with the Tornado Werewolf, it's pretty hard to get maximum fortification when you are pushing high nightmare dungeons and constantly taking damage. So that is why rubies are better, in my opinion, than sapphires. All right, so let's go a little bit more in depth in the guide now. So we're using Tempest Roar. Tempest Roar is the mandatory unique to play this build. This will make it so that your tornadoes are also werewolf skills and enable you to use tornadoes in werewolf form. Why do you want to do this? You want to do this because of rampaging werebees, where when you have Grizzly Rage active, your critical strike damage is increased by 10%. It says 10% multiplicative, but it's 10% additive for the duration. What does this mean? This stacks to 99, and for each crit that you do, you will deal 10% more crit damage, and this stacks up to 990 critical strike damage. This is why it's so important to have Tempest Roar to be able to have Tornado be a werewolf skill, and then stack 1000% critical strike damage with Grizzly Rage, because Grizzly Rage will now transform us into a dire werewolf instead of a dire werebear. And will reduce our spirit cost by 75%, and it will give us a lot of movement speed. So this is like the main thing about the build, getting as low spirit cost as possible, with having critical strike damage with each of our crits, and then having Earth and Might in our skill tree here give us 100% crit chance, and using tornadoes as a werewolf. So this is like the main aspect of the build, right? And then we have Earth and Might. Key passive also applies to your storm skills. So because Tornado is a storm skill now, that will work with Earth and Might. That's how we get our crit. We get core skills up to 40% increased damage based on our amount of Fortify. As I said earlier, when we're pushing very high nightmare dungeons, sometimes you won't get all your fortification up. You won't have like 100% fortify. So this is a little bit less valuable in higher Nightmare dungeons, but still, when you do get it, it's a pretty significant damage boost. We get 25% attack speed with our core skill when we crit, so this enables us to proc even more lucky hits and even more Earth and Might. We get unstoppable. So when we are unstoppable, which is all the time on Grizzly Rage, which we will have with high density, you have up to 100% uptime. With lower density or like single targets, you will have times where you will have anywhere between like 5 and 20 seconds of downtime. 20 seconds is if you're really unlucky on a single target. Yeah, but like you can reduce this amount by like having high cooldown rolls on your totem and on your amulet. But yeah, there will be times where you will have a little bit of downtime. So we get and we can move freely through enemies. So that means that you have phasing, so that you can move freely and you never get body blocked by enemies with this. Disobedience aspect, one of the best aspect in the entire game for defense. You gain 0.5% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 50%. This total armor is additive with the total armor stat that you see here on my pants, the 10.9% total armor. Although this is additive with this one, after this, there's another multiplicative armor that only druids can get. It's armor while in werewolf form or while in werebear form. So for us, we are a werewolf. We get 21% total armor while in werewolf form on our boots, and the same thing on our amulet. So that makes us so that even with 6,000, only like 6.5k armor here, we will be able to reach the supposedly the cap of 13k armor. So 13,000 armor is supposedly the amount you want to have to push Nightmare Dungeons 100. It is the amount of armor we believe to be the magic number to reach 85% DR against mobs of level 154. So, because mobs are always 54 level above the Nightmare Dungeon key that you play in, mobs are 154 in Nightmare Dungeon 100. So that is why you want to have 13k armor. This is why I have the 10.9% total armor here to be able to reach it. It's a very important affix to get on your boots and on your amulet. Total armor while in werewolf form. It is extremely powerful and only available to the druid, so make sure to make use of it. So yeah, we have a defensive pants. For our gloves, I use Tornado will seek up to 3 targets. You can use the build without tornado seeking targets, although it will be very bad against single target because your tornadoes will just like hit them once. So at least have one target, be able to seek one target. You'll already feel so much better with the build, but you can absolutely play this even if you don't have this aspect. And then there's another one here for, again, damage reduction. Gain 15% damage reduction while shapeshift into a werewolf. There's another one that you could use, which is gain 20% damage reduction after you've used a basic attack, like a primary skill. I don't use that one, even though it's more damage reduction, just because it's not always up. Sometimes you will be, running away, or you'll be just spamming tornadoes all the time. So maybe you won't be able to fit in that one extra basic attack. So that is why I use 15% instead of 20, but you could also use the other one and it will be just fine. And last but not least, the Tempest Roar, as we talked about earlier. All right, let's dive into the stats now. So you have Tempest Roar. You don't really have a choice for stats here. So just use any one that you find. For our chest piece, I use damage. Chest piece and pants, it's all about damage reduction, guys. So damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, damage reduction, and damage reduction from distant enemies. The more I play high Nightmare Dungeons, the more I realize that damage reduction while fortified is not might not be as strong as I think it is, just because as soon as you get hit too much, you lose a lot of your fortify amount, and basically for the next hits that you take, you are not getting any damage reduction while being fortified. One thing to note though is that damage reduction while fortified works as even if you get hit above your threshold of fortification, all of the amount of damage that you take on your life that is fortified will be reduced by the damage reduction stat. This is not the same for damage reduction while injured. For damage reduction while injured to work, you need to be in the injured state first. So that means below 35%, and then take a hit. So yeah, still I think it's worth it. But the more I play, the more I'm kind of debating if I want to switch this out for something else. But we'll see. Damage reduction while fortified. Damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned. So how are we poisoning enemies? Poisoned enemies are slowed by 8%, and critical strikes with werewolf skills deal 8% of their base damage as poisoning damage over 4 seconds. Since we're always critically striking with Earth and Might, every enemy that we hit is poisoned. But then again, I have another questioning here: is what do we die from in High Nightmare dungeons? We die from like say you're not fishing for a really good nightmare dungeon, you're trying to just play the game as high as possible. You'll die from raids, which are ranged. You'll die from like those crossbow skeletons things. So some of these mobs, you don't always have the time to go and poison them before getting killed by them. So again, I mean, it's one of the only good, like very high 20% damage reduction stats that you can get. But yeah, so this does not really prevent you from dying from stuff that kills you from afar. But yeah, I still put it there. 10.7% damage reduction. This is just always good, and 28.4% damage reduction from distant enemies. I put this here because I have like one extra roll. Because if you have perfect rolls, you're able to reach 13k armor with only one roll of total armor on your gear. That is why I have this roll here for distant enemies. And on my pants, I have same thing. Damage reduction while fortified from enemies that are poison. Damage reduction from close enemies and total armor. So you see I have one is distant and one is close. But feel free to play around with these. Just make sure to not put any maximum health here, because with the Paragon board, we're going to get so much health that the flat value of life that you get is pretty insignificant in terms of EHP compared to these rolls of damage reduction. So why is this? Because the maximum life value that you can get on an item, it only relies on the so the range that it can roll is reliant on the item power. So not only do you need to have like a very high item power item to have the biggest range that you can possibly get, the value is just straight up worse than everything else because we're getting so much life everywhere else. So if we only had a health pool of like 1k or like 10k health, and then you add another 1k, that's like about 10%, right? But if you have like 30k health and you add 1k, it's a lot less than if you would have less HP. So that makes the rolls on chest piece and pants very bad for life. And the only reason why it's good on rings, it's because we can't really get anything else except damage. So might as well get tankiness because we're pushing high nightmare dungeons. And in high nightmare dungeons, the only thing that is going to hold you back is dying to things that kill you. It's not about damage, because damage we already have with the 1000% critical strike damage. So yeah, make sure to not get life on your chest and on your pants. For our gloves, I'm using +4 ranks of Tornado. This is a very big increase in damage. I think it's about like 30% or so. So +4 ranks of Tornado, 15% attack speed. The more attack speed we get, the more crits we do, the more lucky hits we do, the more we reset the cooldown of Grizzly Rage, and the more we proc Earth and Might. So that is very good. Lucky hit chance and critical strike chance. Critical strike chance we get because on Earth and Might, the chance is increased by 10% for critical strikes to get the lucky hit proc. So that is the only reason we get lucky hit. We get critical strike chance on our gear, because it's very hard to proc Earth and Might at times, and you want to be proccing it as much as possible, because that is the only time where you will actually deal damage, like real damage. So yeah, that is why we have crit everywhere where we can. For our boots, we have movement speed, which is like mandatory on boots. We have damage reduction while injured. So as I said before, you need to be in an injured state for it to work. total armor while in werewolf form, which is multiplicative with the other total armor stats and disobedience, and then 8.6% dodge chance. This will effectively give us 8.6% more EHP because 8.6% of the time you'll take no damage. Of course, this is not good against one shots, but it might 8% of the time you will just avoid that one shot. And yeah, there's nothing else really that we can get here that is significant for our build. Arguably, you could get something like spirit cost reduction or like fortified generation, but I think that dodge for high nightmare pushes is much better. For our weapon, we're using an axe with as high damage per second as possible. Although, if you have another type of weapon with like very good damage and very good stats, please use it. It doesn't really matter. The damage to healthy enemies will help you, but it's not a significant. It doesn't make a significant difference in your overall DPS. Um, 35. So we have vulnerable damage, whale power, core skill damage. I use core skill damage here because it's just it applies all the time, so it makes it so that it's more consistent. Even when you're running away, maybe there's a certain mob that you don't want to be close to, and you will still get the extra damage from there. And the plus 42 all stats is just to be able to reach a certain breakpoint in our Paragon board for our rare nodes, so that we get the bonus stats. So that is why I put this here. And we socket this with critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. For our amulet, we go with cooldown reduction, which is one of the most important stats as well, because we want to get as much uptime on Grizzly Rage as possible, because this will make us unstoppable. This will give us a ton of damage. It's the base of our build, basically. So cooldown reduction here. Total armor while in werewolf form, as I said, multiplicative. Plus 3 ranks to the Envenom passive. So let's talk about the Envenom passive right now. Envenom is a multiplicative critical strike damage multiplier. So what this means is if you have this amulet that has plus 3 ranks to the Envenom passive, poison enemies take 60% multiplicative critical strike damage. Since we're already getting 1000 critical strike damage with Rampaging Werebees, this means that we will be effectively getting 1600% critical strike damage, basically for free with Envenom. So that is why this is such a good passive and such a good choice to take on your amulet. There are other stats you could take if you want to be even more tanky on your amulet. There are other damage reduction stats that you can get. So maybe you can play around with this. Maybe you can like find one amulet with Envenom and another one with more damage reduction and play around with it. But I think it is worth it to get the Envenom passive on your amulet. And then I use 10.7% damage reduction just because it's available at all times, even though it's lower than something like reduction from poison enemies or from fortified. I just like to have that consistency and just always getting that damage reduction. And we socket our accessories with skulls for armor. So our rings, they're both the same. So lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, vulnerable damage, and maximum life. So this is pretty much straightforward. For our totem, we'll go for as high damage per second as possible. Very high cooldown reduction. So this is what I'd say. This is the most important, like cooldown reduction on your amulet and totem. If you can get those to maximum, this will make it a lot more consistent to keep up Grizzly Rage. And then you get lucky hit chance, damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, and damage reduction from while fortified. On your totem, you can also get critical strike chance and critical strike chance to enemies that are injured. Overall, I think for pushing high nightmare dungeons, you want to go for tankiness, but I mean, it could be very good to get maybe just like one stat of damage reduction and then the other one being crit chance, because again, it will make you proc Earth and Might more, and it will basically make your build more consistent. So that is pretty much it for the stats on the gear. I want to talk a little bit about boons here. For the first one here, basically the only one you can really use it to push is take reduced damage from elites. That's the only like good choice that you can do. And then for this one here, you can use a couple ones, but then again, this critical strike damage from Avian Wrath, even though it says it's multiplicative, sounds like it should be about the same as Envenom, right? Well, it's not. It's just 30% flat critical strike damage, really bad. I don't know what they were like, if they were thinking about making this multiplicative. I think so because there's an X, um, but right now it's just not good to take in any situation. You could get 10% attack speed, you could get 5% crit chance, but again, for pushing, I think 10% maximum life is huge. It's just a free EHP boost here. For this one as well, only really reasonable one to take is extend the duration of ultimate skills by 25% because we're so reliant on Grizzly Rage. That's the one we take. Calm Before the Storm is a must as well. Nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. So if you get very lucky procs even on single target, you might be able to keep up your Grizzly Rage at all times. And then Masochistic, it's our kind of like our life leech. Well, it's our way of healing so that especially with very high density with a bunch of tornadoes going around, you will see your life going up and down, up and down, up and down, but this will keep you topped up at all times. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the boons. Now let's talk about where we go into the skills. Only 2 points into our base skills here, Storm Strike, and then Storm Strike has a 15% chance to immobilize all enemies hit for 2.5 seconds, but this is only there to go into the next one here. Again, you gain 25% damage reduction for 3 seconds after dealing damage with Storm Strike, so pretty good to at least hit a couple times, like once in a while with your Storm Strike when you're pushing High Nightmare dungeons. Yeah, that's the reason why we take this. So here we go for maximum spirit is increased just to go to your core skill. They're more damage but cost more spirit. So straightforward. All ranks into tornado, and then each time you cast tornado, you have a 20% chance to spawn another one. So that's like a 20% multiplicative damage. And then enemies hit with tornado have a chance to become vulnerable for 3 seconds. That is our main way to make enemies vulnerable. We go for crit chance against close enemies for 6% to proc Earth and Might even more, and then 9% movement speed while in werewolf form. We are always in werewolf form. That makes us able to reach the cap of 200% movement speed. Here for our defensive skills, we use Cyclone Armor. So Cyclone Armor gives us damage reduction. It's pretty straightforward with the build we're going for. I have 3 points in here just because the 2 other points, I don't really have anywhere else to put them, so I just put 2 more into the damage reduction defensive skills that we use. And then they are knocked back and slowed by 70%. So knockback is pretty cool because Earth and Might will proc more against knockback enemies. So if you're trying to proc your Earth and Might and there's a bunch of enemies around, you can maybe try to knock them back and have a couple more procs with this. And then every 10 seconds, you Cyclone Armor intensifies, giving you 30% damage reduction for 2 seconds. Again, pretty straightforward. We go for Blood Howl. Blood Howl will essentially heal you, but that's not our main healing. Our main healing is Masochistic. So we only use this to get some attack speed here. 15% attack speed for 4 seconds. And then we also have 2 defensive skills. So you gain 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after using a defensive skills. So you can pretty much, as long as you're killing, Blood Howl will come back off cooldown because every kill reduces its cooldown by 1 second. So if you can't keep up Blood Howl every 6 seconds, you can weave in Cyclone Armor to get that damage reduction with your defensive skills. And then also increase your non-physical res by 15%. So that's pretty much it. Nothing in our companion skills. Here we go for Hurricane to get, it's basically another way to proc Earth and Might and another way to get damage reduction. So enemies who are damaged by Hurricane are slowed by 25%, and enemies affected by Hurricane deal 20% less damage. That's another reason why we want to go melee most of the time. Then we have our Storm skill, have a chance to make enemies vulnerable again, just to get to increase the duration of Hurricane to get even more time on damage reduction. Then we talked about this one, poison enemies are slowed, we always poison with crits, and then we get a 60% critical strike multiplier with Envenom. 3 points into Defiance, so our nature magic skills deal 12% increased damage to elites. Then we get Grizzly Rage as our ultimate ability. We are unstoppable while Grizzly Rage is active, which is really good because we are one of the only class that can be like almost permanently unstoppable. And then we gain, this is our main way to fortify. We gain 8% base life as fortify per second while Grizzly Rage is active. Then we boost the fortify amount that we get with Defiance posture. And then when we are hit, we fortify for 4% of our base life sometimes. And then again, Earth and Might is our key passive here. So that is pretty much it for the skills. Let's go into the Paragon board here. So my Paragon board is just a little bit different than some of them that I have seen around. So one of the best boards that I have seen almost uses everything that I use here in a kind of a slightly different order and goes for a couple more damage nodes, where I decided to go for more tankiness. And yeah, I'll just show you guys right now. So basically, I chose to go for as much life as possible. As we can see here, life, 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 life. We have life here. I go out of my way to go grab this life here. I go out of my way to go grab this life here. And yeah, this makes it that we are really, really tanky with our life. And because we have such good healing, like even having a high amount of life doesn't really matter in terms of like how we keep it up. So let's go straight into the glyphs that I use. I use Territorial on the first one for 10% damage reduction against close enemies. As you can see, I don't go for like full dexterity here because I really want to get. I didn't have enough points if I wanted to get all the life nodes that I had on the board. So yeah, I decided to go for less damage and a little bit more life. But I'll show you how you can change this board just a little bit, just to get a little bit more damage if you do want so. So gain 10% damage reduction against close enemies. Then we move up here into Earth and Sky to grant. This one grants 150% bonus to all magic nodes. And why are we taking this one here? 5% damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. That is the main reason. We want to boost the damage reduction as high as possible. And then we have Storm skill damage here. I go out of my way to get life. I go here to get Thunderstruck. Storm skills deal 30% increased critical strike damage against vulnerable or immobilized enemies. That is like, because it's so close, we do get it. Maximum life, maximum life. We go here for 10% damage reduction while in werewolf form, while grabbing some life there. And then I also go out of my way to go grab some life here. As you can see, I have pretty much all the bonuses that give us life or give us. This one, the bonus is only 12% poison res, so I don't really care about this one. But all of the other bonuses on our rare nodes, we do get them. And this is why I got the all stats roll on my weapon here, just to be able to get the intelligence needed for another 4% damage reduction against poison enemies. Yeah. So, and then we go into the heightened malice board. We go grab the node while there are 3 or more poison enemies nearby. We deal more damage. This is good in high nightmare dungeons because since you're not killing as fast as in lower nightmare dungeons, most of the time there's going to be more than 3 enemies around. Yeah, so we go here for the life and the heightened malice. We path here. This one here, there's this armor node there. If you notice that you get above 13k armor, feel free to remove some of the armor nodes that you grab on your Paragon board. We use Fang and Claw, again, for 150% bonus to all magic nodes. Why is this? Again, damage reduction from poison enemies. It's going to be just to boost these defensive nodes here. And then also, I want to state something. The order that you take your boards is very important because it will dictate the amount of stats that you need to get for the bonuses on the rare nodes. So you start Thunderstruck, Constricting Tendrils, Heightened Malice, Inner Beast, and then Lust for Carnage. When you are leveling up, though, you want to be taking Lust for Carnage first to be able to get Crit Strike with Werewolf skills, Restore 2 Spirit. This is mandatory for the build. All right, so our 5th board is Inner Beast. There are 2 boards here. So I chose the board with maximum life and armor. But there's another board that instead of maximum life, you get damage reduction while fortified. But the thing is, as I said earlier, damage reduction while fortified, you're not always fortified when you are in very, very high nightmare dungeons. So that's why I made the choice to go for maximum life instead of damage reduction while fortified. So Inner Beast, we get the bonus here, and then Lust for Carnage. We get some attack speed here, which is really good for our build. We get Lust for Carnage, which is mandatory for the build. As again, I will repeat this: if you're just starting out, grab Lust for Carnage first, like as your first board. And then we go for Undaunted, which gives you 10% damage reduction the more fortify you have. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the build. I was able to clear Nightmare Dungeon 100 fairly easily with this, and of course, it was a very good Nightmare Dungeon, which is Blind Burrows. But I believe that with like my gear was subpar, and I believe that with perfect, like close to perfect gear, or like all the correct stats and all the correct spots with pretty high rolls, you'll be able to farm very high Nightmare Dungeons and a lot more Nightmare Dungeons than you could expect. Like, I think with perfect gear, this can farm any Nightmare Dungeon 100, but it's still to be tested. So that pretty much covers the build. If you have any question, make sure to post them in the comments below or hop in my Discord and you can ask me there as well. And I also stream pretty much every day on Twitch, on twitch.tv/Binishole. And I hope to see you guys very soon. Thank you.